If you're watching this video on a TV, turn off the lights and immerse yourself in the story. I work the graveyard shift at a local shipping warehouse. Most of my job is just counting inventory, making sure all shipments and items are accounted for, and are tracked through the whole organizing process. Every once in a while, I'll have a coworker on the same shift as me, but usually, it's just me. This night was no different than any other. I got to the warehouse, checked in with my manager. He locked up the place and left me to it. I started doing my typical routine, checking all the shipments that came in during the day. About an hour into my shift, I passed by a door that I noticed was cracked open, like it was closed, but just not latched into the doorway. So it was sticking out a little bit. This specific door was on the back of the building, usually where truckers would enter from. I opened it and looked out, seeing an empty and quiet lot outside behind the warehouse. Nothing really to see at all. I figured my manager must have just forgotten to lock it. I didn't have the key to any of these sort of side access doors, so I couldn't lock it or anything. But honestly, I didn't really care. It just wasn't a big deal. I shut it behind me and went back to counting inventory. I was working pretty quick, getting through a decent amount, and making it to the next aisle of shelves, when just from the corner of my eye, it looked like something moved at the far end of the hallway. I immediately looked up, but nothing was there. What it looked like, again, from the side of my vision, was someone running across the opening of the hallway back there. I thought it had to be some weird trick my mind was playing on me, but it still got my heart pumping for a moment. I shook my head, rubbed my eyes, wondering what was up with me. I debated whether or not to check on it, but initially I decided not to, just because it would slow down my workflow to walk all the way down there, and because I was 99% sure it was nothing. Things like this happen all the time. Thinking you see something in the corner of your eye, and every other time, it ends up being nothing. So, why would this be any different? But as the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the small feeling that it could have been someone. I sighed, somewhat disappointed in myself for being so unnerved by this, and walked down to the end of the hallway. This section I never really go to, because it has nothing to do with my job. It's just a bunch of shelves full of large pallets, already prepped to be shipped out of the warehouse, because I don't work in there. Most of the lights were off. I just stood in the hallway and looked into the large, dark room for a few seconds, waiting to see if I saw anything move, but nothing did. I left the hallway and went back to work in the same spot I was before. I don't know if it was because of that small situation, but it felt like I just got hit by a wave of exhaustion. Suddenly, I was tired and not wanting to work as quickly as I was. Just a few minutes before all this happened. I wanted to finish this aisle before taking my break, though. So, I kept working. But not even 5 minutes passed before I suddenly noticed something in the side of my vision again. I jolted my eyes toward the end of the hallway. I swear, it looked like a figure, or someone was leaning out from behind the corner, like they were watching me. But now, nothing was there. This time, I immediately dropped what I was doing and hurried to the end of the hallway. Again, though, it was dark, and I really didn't see anything at all. I called out, not really expecting any response, but Figured it was worth a try. Hello? I waited a few seconds, then walked further into the room. It was so quiet, every step I took echoed all the way through the warehouse. I stopped about halfway through and looked around. As I stood there, I felt an incredibly disturbing and unsettling feeling of being watched and not being able to see anything. Only made it worse. I hurried back to where I came from, making it to the other end of the hallway. Before I glanced back one more time, the darkness in that room gave me chills. I started to walk away, to go back to work, when a sudden, extremely loud thud rang through the warehouse. It was metallic, like someone banging metal against one of the large shelving units. Afterward, there were a few seconds of silence, only filled by the faint echoes lingering through the room. Before there was another thud, quieter this time, like a repeated tapping against the metal shelf. It was like they were trying to get my attention, to lure me back into the dark room. But knowing this had to be a person now, and being completely horrified, I ran away. But surprisingly, when they went in, they found someone hiding behind one of the large shelves in the dark room. It was a man in his 40s, with a very disheveled and creepy look. But even more creepy is that when they reviewed the security footage, they found him walking around the outside of the building several times throughout the last week, going around checking all the doors to see if they were unlocked. All of these nights, I was alone inside the warehouse, sometimes just on the other side of the door from him. From the short amount that I saw him get dragged out of the warehouse and into the cop car, the guy seemed pretty unhinged and crazy. I don't know if they ever really figured out what he was trying to do, but just thinking about him trying to lure me into the room still makes me really uneasy. When I was in college, I worked part-time, overnight shifts at my parents' laundromat. It was just some dinky place on the edge of town. The building, I'd always found surprisingly creepy for what it was. Something about the place being really old and the machines constantly humming in the background was just unsettling. I still thought it was better working at a place my parents owned over anywhere else, though. This was a Friday, which was the only day I worked a full overnight shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I took over from my dad, who left me some snacks in the back room, and told me the usual, to call and wake him if I needed anything. There were still a few customers trickling in for the next hour, so I stayed behind the counter and made sure it all ran smoothly. By midnight, everyone was gone, and all the machines were left empty. I waited behind the counter for another 15 minutes, just sitting on my phone and waiting a bit longer before doing any of the cleaning tasks. But during that time, a customer walked in. I looked up and was pretty confused. He had nothing with him, like no clothes or laundry of any kind, and he had a thick hoodie with the hood over his head and hands in his pockets. I said hello, but he didn't look at me or say anything back. He just walked in and slowly made his way through the aisles of washers and dryers, kind of looking around, I guess, before going back to the entrance and leaving out the doors. I couldn't help but watch him as he left and walked out into the parking lot. He didn't get into any car or anything. He just crossed the street and went out of sight. It's not every day. Someone walks into a laundromat in the middle of the night for no reason and just walks around. I guess he didn't technically do anything wrong, but I felt really weird about it. Being alone in there definitely didn't help. I think if other customers were inside, I would have felt safer for sure, and maybe not even noticed anything, with nothing to do about it though. I just started doing my cleaning tasks. As I cleaned, the only reason I could think of for that guy coming in and walking around was that maybe he was looking for a lost clothing item that he might have dropped earlier in the day. It was a stretch, considering the obvious thing to do would be to ask me if I had seen it, but he didn't. That's pretty much all I thought about for the next 20-ish minutes as I walked around and cleaned off all the counters and tidied up the place. At some point, though, I happened to look up from what I was doing, and standing right outside the entrance was that guy from before. I almost didn't even realize it was a person behind the glass, because he was wearing all black, and of course, it was dark outside. By the time I did and recognized him, he had started walking away already. How long was he standing there, watching me for? After a few moments, I went up to the door and got as close as I could to look down the storefront, but the guy was already gone. I couldn't even see where he went. Something about his appearance and the eerie way he was just showing up was really creepy and didn't make me feel comfortable at all. I thought about calling my dad, but I would have felt horrible waking him up and having him take over my shift just because of some guy I thought was slightly suspicious. I knew my dad wouldn't give me a hard time about it, but I was still in my first couple of months working there and wanted to prove I was reliable. I stayed on the lookout for the next hour, pretty much sitting behind the counter and staring out the front windows the whole time. After more and more time passed, though, and with still no customers coming in at all, I slowly started to pay less attention. I was on my phone for a while, just trying to wait out the time, until there were a couple short creak sounds from the back of the building. I got up and walked a few steps toward the back, trying to listen. I could hear what sounded like shuffling around or someone moving things in one of the back rooms. I only listened for a few seconds before knowing someone was back there and realizing I needed to leave. I turned and quietly moved to the front door, preparing to call the cops and pushing on it to leave. But the door got stuck. It wouldn't open. I looked down, seeing through the glass that something was around the handles on the outside of the door. I immediately realized that that's what the man was doing outside the building when I saw him standing by the door, watching me. My whole body filled with panic. There was only one back exit door. I started very quietly, stepping closer to the back room, still hearing them moving stuff around back there, but definitely doing so in a careful way, as if they were trying to be quiet about it. When I got to the doorway and looked in, I saw him. His back was facing me as he was searching through some of the boxes on the floor. Then I looked at the exit. This was my chance. I sprinted for the door. The man immediately shifted around and saw me. I got to the door, and for a moment, my heart sank. There was some makeshift-looking rope tied around the handle, like he was trying to tie it shut. Fortunately, whatever he did didn't work, and I was still able to force it open and make a run for it. As soon as I was out of the building, the man came out too. But now, out in the open, he didn't chase me. He just made a run for it. My dad and police came, but there wasn't a lot of leads on where he could have gone to. Clearly, that man was trying to trap me inside with him. I'm assuming he was trying to do it sneakily, but had to look around for something to help tie down the back exit door, which ultimately allowed me to escape when I did. His intentions were likely horrifying, and now, replaying the whole night back, it feels crazy that I didn't notice anything was really wrong until the last minute. At least now, I'm 1,000 times more aware, and when I'm working alone, never trusting anyone, to be truly harmless. Because I know, if that man was successful in locking that back door, there would have been no escape. For me. If you're watching this video on a TV, make sure to like and subscribe. But if you're watching on your phone, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.